Okay, hi again, guys. After a few technical difficulties, basically running out of battery power, we decided to have part
to
two.
the people.
Yes, we got the power back.
We've
didn't
got the power, but take power back
Okay.
into
Yes.
our own hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been talking with Barrie Sargeant today, who is an avowed anarchist. In the first part of the interview, he gave some information about anarchism in New Zealand and his part in that. And we'd like to talk a bit more about what he's been doing in terms of activism in the world of anarchism. So, Barrie, what would you like to say about your activist part of anarchism?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess, over the years, you do become involved in all sorts of different campaigns and stuff that's going on out there in society with an aim to, improving things and getting things in the way that you want. And just like everyone, I've been involved in lots of different things. After 30 years, that's going to happen, Different things get public attention more than others at certain times. So, for example, in recent years, TPPA stuff. Because I know that's one of yours too.
Yes.
That's true. I've always been happy to get involved in whatever's going on. However, I think for me, in terms of, you hear a lot of people describing themselves as activists.
Yes.
I always feel a bit ambivalent about that one because, to me, I always start off by saying I'm an anarchist who happens to be active in a certain thing that's going on,
Yes.
Because I'm a bit worried that activism without any political theory behind it means that you dissipate what you're trying to do, and you tend to get co-opted, or you tend to sort of dilute the impact of what you're doing if there isn't an idea behind it, So I would always describe myself as an anarchist who happens to be doing something actively in whatever it is,
Yes.
So
getting away from the label of activist.
It's quite confining, I think, and I think it's fraught, a bit.
Interesting.
But I mean, I understand it as a shorthand and day-to-day speaking that you've got to say something,
Yes.
right? I get that.
Yep.
So I have been involved in all sorts of different activist stuff over the years, but I suppose primarily for me, the main interest area I have would be doing anti-fascist or anti-Nazi work. Here in New Zealand, England, and a little bit in Japan and as well.
Oh, okay.
And of course the internet, if that counts as its own world, its own place, I suppose.
Yes, a global,
virtual
dynamic,
thing,
virtual thing.
whatever it is.
Yes, that's right.
So that's been the main thing that's always interested me.
Start us off.
I suppose the thing that it comes down to for me with that is that when you look at the landscape politically of what's out there, you've got the established spectrum of, in New Zealand, the Labour Party, the National Party, the Greens, so call them the establishment, or if you like. Outside of that, you've got people who want to fundamentally change things as the system, for want of a better word. And
lots of people watching this will identify with that.
And when you look at that, I see the anarchists and the fascists or the Nazis as probably the two, at the moment, the two most significant rivals to the established politics. And internationally, I think the sort of ultra-right and the fascists have been getting a lot of traction. If you look at a lot of the stuff going on in Europe, not just Europe, but a lot of that. And I think it's something that has to be taken seriously,
right,
and thought about. And I think also because if you look at their politics, there's a lot of question about definition again. It's again, fascism tends to be used the same way anarchy gets used. Are you fascist? It's just someone you don't happen to like.
Yeah.
It's
a bit authoritarian.
Fascist? Yeah, well, not even that. It's just someone you don't like.
Yes.
Bloody fascist, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
It's doing a disservice in the sense that in order to combat something, You have to have a sound understanding of it in a
Correct.
solid definition, and then you can deal with it. And when I look at them, to me, they are the exact opposite of what we are.
Okay.
You know, as I see it.
Say more about that.
Well, I would say that, you know, a generalization, but fascists basically want the establishment of a society or a regime that is fundamentally based on lots of hierarchies, you know, hierarchies of gender, of race quite often, and of class and so on. They see that as inherently good. It's authoritarian, and that they want to have the establishment of force in order to get that. And to me, that is exactly the opposite of what we're about. You know, we want to have non-hierarchical relationships in society and politically and economically.
Yeah.
So in some ways that wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for the fact that they are prepared to use force to implement that.
Right.
You know? So to me, they represent an existential threat to myself.
Right.
And in the competition to improve or get rid of the current system, I see them as the main competitor, main threat,
Right.
as it were. So, you know, I think that's why they are worth looking at.
Yeah.
You know, they need to be taken seriously and looked at. You know?
But in terms of talking about violence and threat, would you be willing in that case, if it came up, to confront that threat?
Absolutely. I think it's...
Because there's a kind of paradox in there that you want to counter violence, but that could involve some kind of violent revolution or counter to their form of oppression.
Well, yeah, but I don't think that you know, you have to have you know, it's a suicide pact if you're going to say, oh, I'll just disarm myself and let them do whatever they're going to do.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, I've had actual practical times where you had to make a decision like that. For example, when I was in England, the refugee issue was quite big.
Yeah.
And the area where I lived had quite a big influx of refugees from Eastern Europe at the time. And they had
another interview which I'm very passionate about.
They had refugee hostels.
Right.
And I remember
what kind of time period are we talking?
Oh, this would have been late 90s, so Kosovo and that
Oh,
sort of thing.
okay.
You know.
Yes. Thank you.
And I remember going to this demo once, and there was a park, and there were some railings set up, and the National Front and their supporters were on the other side, and we were on one side. And not huge numbers involved, maybe 30 to 50 on each side.
Okay.
And we were shouting at them, they were shouting at us. And what we didn't realize is that while we were doing that, we were being outflanked because a large group of very aggressive skinheads, basically, had come round the corner onto the street where we were, marching towards us. And right where we were was one of the refugee hostels.
Oh.
Now, I wouldn't say anybody on our side was particularly, you know, a fighter or looking for it. But all of a sudden we turned round to the side to hear what all this noise was, and there's this group of about 20, 30 quite aggressive skinheads coming at us. And now it's the fight or flight response thing. You know, what are you going to do at that point? If we had run away, they quite likely would have entered that refugee hostel, which had families and kids and whatnot. And who knows what they would have done.
So there was no legal presence there?
No, at the time. I don't know where the cops were at the time. I don't know. They turned up later on.
Of course.
You know, I mean, there might have been a sprinkling around, but, you know, they're not always in control of the situation anyway, which is in some ways a good thing. You know, you've got a choice at that point. Do you confront them?
Or flee.
Or go. And the consequences of going is, one, you know, the people you're trying to protect, the refugees, who knows what would have happened to them, and to yourself, you know, you would have, you know, they would have been emboldened, and we probably would have got beaten up ourselves. So there was a bit of a tussle, and, you know, people getting thrown around and hit and whatnot, and we managed to hold them back, and they never got in. And if you look historically at the nature of fascism and Nazis and stuff, they are only ever stopped by physical force, you know. I think what's very interesting there is that if you look at historically, there's you know, a lot of people, particularly who might describe themselves as liberals, let's say, they're very wary about the use of force to be against Nazis, and yet people like my grandfather actually got paid to shoot and kill Nazis in World War II, and got medals and got parades and that was seen as a good thing.
So it's in certain contexts only.
Oh yeah, if it's historical,
by the establishment.
if it's historical and safely put off to one side, and consigned to history, then you can mythologize it, and that's good. That violence was all right. Try doing it now, and suddenly they don't like it. And yet it's actually the same people. Thing. It's really the same.
And the
people.
same battle.
I mean, not that I'm saying that you always have to go out looking for physical fights and confrontations.
Sure.
But I'm saying to take it off the agenda is suicidal, because if you truly understand the nature of who these people are, it's inherent in their politics that is how they do what they do.
So conceding in the ground would be basically suicide.
Yeah,
in a broader sense.
You know, these are not people that you can sit down and have a chat with over cocoa at the fireplace. You know, and that's just it. It has to be realised. Now, how much violence is involved, when and how, and all that, it's on a spectrum.
Yes,
you know, but I'm just saying it has militant anti-fascism is important.
It has a place in
it still does. It has
struggle.
to. Yeah, I think it does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I'm not saying everybody has to get a gun right now or something.
Yes.
You know, but I don't have a problem with it. Okay. In certain circumstances.
Right.
You know, it's necessary.
So, what is the state of play with fascism as you see it in New Zealand now and in recent history?
Oh, in New Zealand, well, it has to be acknowledged that the numbers involved are incredibly small.
Right.
You know, in terms of people who self-identify that way, or are actually organised in actual groups and so on. And of course, a lot of people say, well, in that case, why are you bothering? You know, you do hear people who otherwise can be quite sensible and would consider themselves politically aware and so on. Some of them will say, well, you know, why bother? I think what that fails to recognise is, again, it doesn't understand the real nature of who these people are. Right. Because you don't actually need a heck of a lot of them to cause real trouble. For example, if you look at in America, in Charlottesville, which is a very recent example, Heather Heyer, who was an anti-fascist activist, was murdered. Yes. And that was one guy in a car who did that. Now, I don't think anybody being murdered is acceptable. No one on our side being murdered is acceptable. And that just took one guy doing that, you know, in actual fact. So it's not really about numbers necessarily. Again, it's that thing, the fact that they exist at all is a problem. Yes. You know, so no matter how many of them there are, they should always be taken seriously and thought of and counted in some way. And there are examples in New Zealand too where, you know, I'm not going to name names or incidents necessarily, but I can think of times in the recent past that I've seen where, you know, a very few of them have been able to cause real trouble for people, physical trouble, property damage, all sorts of things like that. You know, just making life difficult for people who just trying to live their lives. You know, not do anything wrong. So the numbers thing doesn't come into it, but it has to be admitted, in New Zealand, no, there aren't that many of them, and they're not very well organised. You know?
Okay. An argument that often comes up in liberal and activist circles is freedom of speech. So that is a tricky subject in this realm. So a lot of people were saying, oh, we have to give them their space for freedom of speech in terms of fascism or ideologies that we find offensive. So where do you stand on that kind of argument?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really buy into that myself. I think to some extent it's helpful just to know what they believe. So you know, if you really understand what they're about, again, you can do something about them. So you know, you have to know what their ideas are. So in that sense, they've got some speech in order to find out that. I mean, that's sort of a minimum and all that. Right. But no, it's not something I go along with myself. I don't see that they have that to me. The right to freedom of speech. You know, they have the freedom to do it in their own house, I suppose. But you know, speech leads to actions.
Okay.
And the sort of actions and sort of speech that they advocating are harmful to people. You know, it's just by its nature, it's harmful. And yeah, because of who and what they are and what they're saying. So no, I very much, as a platformist, I'm very much in favour of no platform for Nazis. You know, I think they've taken themselves. You know, no decent society would want them or should have them. They're not part. They shouldn't be allowed into being part of the discussion. You know, genocide is not a point of view. It's not acceptable. Or you know, racism is not. It just is not. There's nothing to debate there. There's nothing. I don't want to hear that. I don't. The case closed as far as I'm concerned on that stuff. There isn't any common ground to discuss about it. So why do I want to listen to that? You know.
So then it leads to other things like Holocaust denial and
propaganda
like that.
Well, that's true too. You know. Yeah, that's quite an insidious sort of thing that's come up in recent decades as well.
Yeah.
And for me, I think there's that ties into the whole idea of whether things are true or real, or if there's a material, objective reality out there, or whether everybody's opinion is equally valid. Well, I don't think it is. I think we have to have the ability to say certain things are wrong.
Yes.
And that certain things happened or didn't happen, and take it from there. You know? I know there are certain people on the left who like the idea of relativism, the idea that everybody's view is all okay and all that sort of thing. But Holocaust denial is an example of where that goes wrong. You know, if you allow that, then look what happens. You know, you get people who are going to stand up and say stuff that is absolutely not true. You know, and is hurtful too.
Yes, very dangerous
to those people who died, for one thing, and their families and so on like that. But you know, I just don't think you can get anywhere unless you start from what's real.
Yes.
You know, things really did happen or didn't happen, and you know, yeah.
I think to finish up on this bit, I'd like to talk a little bit about what you said in the States about Charlottesville, and that ties into the rise of Trumpism. Yeah. Where do you think that relates to what we've been talking about today?
Well, Trump's an interesting one, isn't he? Because you know, he isn't a Nazi, and he isn't a fascist, and he's hard to get a handle on in some ways, you know, but it certainly is clear, I think, by now, even though it's only been a year, that his sort of attitudes and his way of his discourse, his way of style, if you like, has engendered and emboldened the people who actually are Nazis and are fascists to grow and feel confident. You know, his xenophobia, which he is against foreigners, you know, and his immigration stuff and build the wall and all that, is bringing along people who are more extreme than himself.
Right.
You know, so it is encouraging this environment, and that is an international thing. You know, you look at Europe and some of the things that happened around Brexit.
Yes.
And in Germany, in opposition to some of what Merkel's done,
and Greece.
Greece, you know, Golden Dawn and all that, and Greece and Hungary as well.
Yes.
All this stuff. So there is like the mood out there. Is it is gaining traction because there are elements of the mainstream establishment who are allowing this to happen consciously or through ignorance. So it is scary what's going on out there right now because of that. And I think, you know, Trump's just one element of that. And I think again, I come back to that point. That's why I think we have to be really vigilant. We can't take anything for granted. We've got to equip ourselves in terms of knowing what's going on out there, and then coming up with sort of strategies to deal with that as best we can. You know, so again, it's two sides. One is having a theory to counter it,
Yes.
and two, what you're actually doing in the physical world
Correct.
about that. You know,
Yeah.
But you know, the New Zealand thing. Like I said before, there's. I don't think there is a viable fascist future for New Zealand. You know,
Okay.
xenophobia maybe. You know, there's elements, of course, with New Zealand first and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you know, the alt right, there's a tinge of that
Yes.
with that. But I don't at the moment see it as a big problem in New Zealand. But yeah, internationally. But you know, things could change if we get a really severe economic crisis.
Correct.
It can happen. Again, you look at
take
historical
much.
precedents. No,
No.
it doesn't. And that's why you've always got to be on your guard about it.
So
you know.
that's where you see the need to be vigilant and have groups like anarchists and other people who are staunchly anti-fascist.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely vital. Again, because I think you know, the difference I would distinguish between, say, liberals and us is that I think most anarchists would agree that the extreme right, the fascists, the Nazis, and so on, are an existential threat. Their very existence is a problem.
Yeah.
Because they are so fundamentally opposite to us,
Right.
and yet prepared to use force to impose themselves, that we can't afford to just go to sleep on it.
No, whereas
You know?
a lot of people on the liberal left would see that they can be negotiated and dealt with. And
Well, I think there's a certain arrogance
On that.
amongst
Yeah.
liberals, frankly, that you know their perception of fascists and Nazis is that they're ignorant. They're ignorant people that if we just threw enough education at them, they'd all wake up and you know,
come round.
if we just hugged them enough and gave them enough education, they would come round to they'd want to be liberals basically.
Yes.
And that's arrogant. It's arrogant in the extreme.
History has proven that to be.
Yeah, well, I just think
Not the case.
it's just based on a certain arrogance. I mean, for a start, where do they think these Nazis and fascists came from? You know, they went to the same schools that everyone else did. You know, they grew up in the same society that everyone else did.
And often come from an educated background, at least
Well,
their leadership.
Certainly, I mean, yeah. If you look at historical examples, you know, Dr. Goebbels,
Yes.
people. I think we talked before we started this about you know, if you look at the Einsatzgruppen,
Yes.
the killing groups who killed Jews on the Eastern Front, the leaders of them had PhDs. Some of
Yes.
them had double PhDs. Having education itself doesn't stop you
No,
becoming a Nazi. And I
Because they
think-
had an ideological veneer behind what they were doing.
well, I think the thing is that a lot of
education.
liberals in particular don't get is that they don't appreciate that fascism as an ideology, that it is a political point of view that these people have thought through, and some of them do think a lot, you know, and they're not stupid people, some of them. Some are, but, you know, a lot, you don't have to be. And they've really done their homework, and they've looked at this stuff, and they've made the conscious, rational, decision. I don't think it's the right one, but
No.
you know, they've made the decision to become a Nazi or to become a fascist.
Yes.
It's not that they're misled or ignorant or stupid people, and don't underestimate them.
No.
And I think a lot of liberals do. That liberals have this arrogant thing that, oh well, you know, they're just uneducated, and quite often there's a class thing in there too. Working class, sort of ignorant, uneducated people become Nazis, you know, sort of thing. Whereas I think they need to be understood as, people who've thought it through, have made a political choice,
And a conscious choice.
a conscious choice. No, I think it's a wrong one.
Yes.
And I think it's really not
Most
good.
of us
you know.
watching and being part of today would agree.
But I think to approach it in
Hopefully all of us.
yeah.
Otherwise, please befriend me over there.
But I think if you approach it in a moralistic way or some sort of patronizing kind of way, you're not going to get a handle on what they're
No.
really about.
No.
You have to appreciate them as a political movement. You know, overall. I mean, individuals in there, they may have their own. You know, people are complex. They might have their own different reasons for joining it. And
Yes.
you know, I'm not saying they all sit around reading, you know, deep stuff all the time.
Nietzsche.
Yeah, and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, I think it comes back to that point. You have to, in order to tackle anything, you have to understand it for what it actually is, and
it's better to overestimate your enemy than
and approach it with a certain appreciation for what it really is, rather than the caricature, the straw figure version that
of the dumb meathead.
Yeah. I mean, of course, some of them are. I mean,
yes.
Let's be honest, some of them are. You know,
there are foot soldiers to every movement. But
but if that's not the full story, I mean, you know, there is. If you look at it in Europe again, and you know, to America too, they have looked at what are genuine social and economic problems. You know, that are out there, and these are their considered responses to those genuine, real problems.
Yes,
you know. And you know, you've got to try and tackle that. Now, it doesn't mean you have to debate them about it.
No.
You know, but it means more that you have to understand where they're coming from, and you've got to put up your own, I think, better alternative, or you know,
to confront.
Because I think that's the thing. As I said, I see it as there's this mainstream establishment view of things where we'll tinker with the system a little bit, which is not going to do very much as far as I'm concerned, or you go outside the mainstream and see what else is on offer. And I think that, you know, our vision where people cooperate,
yes,
you know, across borders, across ethnic lines, you know, to me, workers in New Zealand are going through the same problems that workers in China are going through. And pick anywhere else you like. I mean, you know, wherever, you know, we've got far more in common with them, despite language problems and you know, watching different TV programs, whatever it is, than, you know, people who supposedly look the same, I mean, or whatever it is, or happen to speak the same language, or happen by accident to be born in the same country, or whatever it is.
Yes,
you know, and to me that's you know, when the chips are down and the system collapses or whatever happens. I think I would hope that our way of doing it, you know, is seen and understood to be a far more positive approach than that other one that I outlined. I mean, there aren't only Nazis in the world, I know.
No,
that's the trouble.
So broader.
The trouble with me being that interested in what I'm interested in, and you sort of, you know, because I mean, there are other kind of
seeing Nazis under a bed.
There are other ideologies out there I also have a problem with, obviously.
But that's one that you're particularly.
But that's
focused
where
on.
I've put my focus on, because I think, you know, you can get involved in all sorts of things and just get exhausted and spread yourself too thin.
But it's good to have a focus.
Yeah, and you know, as long as there are other people out there doing other things as well, you know, and to the same degree that I do this, then hopefully
the big picture is
hopeful. I mean, you know, in some ways it would be nice just to be doing anarchist stuff. You know, like there was a period where I'd spent ages and ages reading all this Nazi, fascist, horrible stuff in order to understand them. You know,
the psychology.
Yeah, the psychology of it. No, it's know your enemy. You know, and I wish I didn't have to do that so much.
Did you have to go and debrief with someone after?
No.
Yeah,
but I think it is necessary. I think it's incumbent upon you to know what you're dealing with. Like I said, you know what the reality is, know what it's about, in order to fight it or deal with it and all that, you know?
Okay. Well, thank you again, Barrie, for your time today.
That's all right.
It's a holiday weekend.
Yeah.
Remember Barrie's group, the Aotearoa Worker Solidarity Movement. Awesome, for short.
Awesome.
That website. And also they have a Facebook page, which I know Barrie's not a big fan of Facebook, but it's a big concession for him being here today.
That's just me. I like technology, I'm just not good with it.
Okay. So there's Facebook presence, website presence. Also, I'd just like to remind you of my own Facebook page, Alex Puri. Also, Neoliberalism Must Die Facebook page, and protect our assets, Aotearoa, as well. So, all about the issues I'm passionate about. And again, thank you for watching, either a live broadcast or hopefully you can encourage people to watch the after video. Enjoy the rest of your Easter. Thanks very much, guys, and thanks again, Barrie.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome.